I'm constantly looking into staying in as much hobby debt as I possibly can, and I've always wanted to do some Astra Militarum. I can't find the standard box sets that they used to do anymore with the double Cadians and the Scout and all that, but you know, I want to do that eventually, and I was kind of thinking maybe some Krieg would be cool. I went to an out-of-the-way game store and I found one of the old combat patrols, the ones with units I actually care about, but there are horses in them, and I'm just not a horse guy. But in this video, I wanted to show you how I painted Russian Gold Berezka camo, because I thought to myself what would be a really cool idea is to paint a Krieg army like Soviet soldiers. I think it's a cool idea. I know it's a big deviation from standard box art, and I know some people don't like that. I like it. I think it's cool. Women don't respect it. I like it. So I decided to paint up a test model of one of the Krieg riders in Gold Berezka camo and make him look as Russian as possible, and I think he turned out awesome. I don't like creatures, never liked it. Painting a Tyranid army is like my worst nightmare, and I was not looking forward to painting these horses, but I was like, you know what, we're just gonna go for it. And this might be one of my favorite models, I'll be completely honest. I'm gonna do the rest of them in this scheme, I'm pretty sure. As long as I find the time to paint, which there is none.
Alrighty, so you can see I've got my queue of models, and I decided to jump the queue, jump the line a little bit, and paint up one of these Krieg riders from the box set that I got, mostly because I thought it'd be a challenge, and I didn't really want to paint it. You know, I'm just not interested in creatures, and I thought, you know, well, let's try to make this cool. So, as always, I started with a Zenithal highlight, so it's just the black rattle can from the bottom, and then white all over the top, just to create some natural shadows for me. And once I got that all done, I'm going to go through and just kind of clean up the actual horse part. I think I'm going to kind of make him a pale rider similar to the box art. I was thinking like a brown horse, but honestly, with the camouflage and all the leather I'm going to do, that's going to be really dark, and I don't want to have too much of the same tone. I want the model to stand out. Again, you know, in my other videos I talk about, I like having lots of contrast. So your eye can easily differentiate the different parts of the model and really see what it is. So we are going to go with a pale rider. I'll probably just copy this exact same technique for all the other horses when I eventually paint those guys up as well. Now we're going to be doing a wash on the horse himself, and so I'm going to be using Skeleton Horde mixed up with some technical Lamy and medium. And I'm going to be diluting the heck out of this Skeleton Horde. I'm doing it at like a 25-75 ratio, and I'm going to be going over the whole horse. The reason is because I don't want to dark him up too much. I want him to be pretty pale, and so, you know, I don't want to use very much of that Skeleton Horde at all. So you can kind of see I'm just going through, I'm definitely guiding the paint into the recesses, and I'm making sure that it's not pooling up too much. And I also want it to go over consistently so I don't get any splotching over this model. So just be careful when you're doing this. You know, washes can either make or break a model, and you know, I'm trying to lay it on really thick where the kind of saddle is sitting on the horse, just because I really want a strong contrast and shadow, and then just guiding the wash where I want it to settle. Again, making sure that it's not going to pool anywhere where I don't want a dark shadow. So as the camera's out of focus there, you can see I'm just going down the legs and just going to be doing all over this guy with this Skeleton Horde wash. Skeleton Horde is just like one of the best washes ever. It's kind of subtle and just makes things look awesome. Alrighty, now I'm going to take a little bit of the Contrast Flesh Terrors Red and mixing it up with the Lamy and Median and essentially thinning it down to nothing. And I'm going to be going over the legs, and also there's some like veins on the horses. I'm going to be kind of highlighting those veins up just to give it a little bit more of an organic look. Again, the main thing I'm looking for as I'm putting on this wash is just to make sure that there are no hard lines where I don't want them. In a couple spots I'll add some of this mix to generate some shadows kind of near where the saddle is, I should say. And you know, I don't mind hard lines there, but I'm trying to kind of blend this into the existing wash we already did. So we're just going through and making sure that there's not any hard lines. We want them to be soft and blended and look natural. And I'm just going over and highlighting a little bit of the veins on this horse. And then if I got too harsh of lines, I'll dry off my brush on a paper towel and then come back over and just kind of blend it up. Maybe even add a little bit of water on my brush and just go back over everything and just make sure it blends really well. You know, that's the thing with creatures and stuff, is organic things blend, whereas mechanical things have very hard, harsh lines. And I'm not good at blending things. That I have a hard time with it, but you know, we'll get better. But that's why I generally kind of stay away from creature models. It's just because it's a long process for me, because I don't know why. Alrighty, so next I'm going to do the camo. Probably I should have started with the lowest layer, with being the leather saddle and some of the lower parts, but I just got really excited to make sure that the camo turned out the way I wanted it to. So I'm using olive camo green from Vallejo, and I'm going to actually be doing all of the armor in the camouflage pattern and all of the cloth and leather in brown and black. I just thought it would look cool. You know, I know the Krieg generally just have steel armor, but sometimes it's cool to have, like, you know, painted on metal armor. So I'm going to be doing the horse's little chest front piece here, parts of his gas mask, all the Krieg rider's armor, and there's also one little spot on the saddle I'll show you here in a minute that I actually paint in the camo too. I think it's technically leather, but I thought it would just look good to have an extra little armor panel. So we're just going over everything. This is one of those paints that is going to require a couple of layers because it just doesn't thin quite right. But you can see I'm doing the top of the horse here, and then I'll also do the front of his mask, and just do that all in green. It's great. This camo green, I think it's like a US colored green, but gosh, it's a perfect Soviet color for all their metal armor. I mean, it just looks spot on to all the stuff I've seen in real life. So it's a great little color. And yeah, we'll just go over all the armor panels. On the Krieg guy, I decided to do the armor panels in the camouflage as well, and then I'm going to give him a black uniform here in a bit. In hindsight, I probably would have done a little bit different of a recipe for the uniform. I kind of go a little bit quicker than I normally would have on this guy because there's just so much to paint, and I like to try to keep my model painting times around an hour or two, just because if I'm painting up an army, it just gets tedious after 2 hours per model, especially for general line infantry. It's like if they're just going to get smashed by some hero, then I don't want to spend 20 hours of my life on them. But here you can see there's part of this saddle that I think is just supposed to be leather, but I'm actually painting it with this green because I want it to look like armor. I just didn't feel like what was already existing on there was quite enough, and I definitely want to make the camo the showcase of this model. So we're gonna make a little faux armor panel on his back there. So once we're done, I'm gonna go through with just a off-white, I believe I am using Citadel Corax White. I'm going to be doing the horse's gas mask and also the rider's gas mask. It's a very good color for like the Soviet colored gas masks. It's almost spot on. Maybe a little bit of a yellow twinge made it look a little bit more historically accurate, but obviously this isn't a historical miniature, at least not yet, right? So just painting this guy up. I usually never use a solid white. I don't even think I have a solid white. I use off-white for pretty much everything. Here you can see I'm going through and doing the uniform on the Krieg rider. I mixed up a little bit of black and gray, and it's dark gray. In hindsight, I probably should have gotten black and mixed it with a little bit of that green that I used for his armor panel. It would have lightened up the black a little bit and given it more of a similar tone to the rest of the armor, and then highlighted up from there. This is kind of one of my old slab chop methods for doing uniforms, and it just didn't really turn out quite how I would have liked it. But you can see I got all the uniform painted up, and the next thing I'm going to be doing is all of the leather, the saddle, and any other little leather straps. I'm going to be using Vallejo German dark brown, and this brown has kind of got like a little bit of a purple hue to it. I just love this color. This is a great color. It goes on very, very dark, and as it dries, it lightens up quite a bit. This is just a great dark leather brown for this model. yeah, so pretty much everything on there, the straps, the saddle that the guy is riding on, any of the straps on his backpack, on the Krieg model himself too. I'll probably use this color for like his belt and just any other leather pieces on him. I'm also going over the little rifle pouch that's on the side of the horse, and I am going to be doing the reins in a different color just because I want those to stand out. I don't want everything to blend in. If you do everything the same color, your eye's not going to be able to tell the difference between some things on the tabletop. So, sometimes I'll use brighter colors on leather that I really want to stand out. Alrighty, so you can see here I'm using the Army Painter Leather Brown to just go over the reins on this guy. If there were any other additional pouches I added on, I'd probably use this color. I know sometimes there's some models where you can add like the magazine pouches on the back of his little saddle there. I might do it in that color. It's hard to say. Part of me almost wants to do like a tan pouch. The Soviets had a very light colored pouch for some of their magazines and grenades and stuff. But I'm trying to keep this guy bare and not do too many pouches, also because I plan on using the pouches on some of my Krieg models to make him look more tactical. Now I'm going to be taking Eschen Gray, and I'm going to be using this on everything that is metal on this model. So the little bottom of his sword sheath here has a metal backer on it so the sword doesn't cut through the leather. I'll be doing his gun in the Eschen Gray color as well, and this is just my favorite recipe for doing firearms and metal, is just to do an Eschen Gray and then do a Nuln Oil coat over top of it. It doesn't really require any highlighting. Again, I could spend more time on this model, but I usually like to cap out around 2 hours because if I paint 5 of these guys and it's 2 hours a pop, I can maybe shorten it by like 10 to 20% if I do batch painting, but it's not fun to just paint like horses for 4 hours one morning and you get just the horse done. I like to get the army painted up and out the door as quickly as possible. Now for part of the gun, I'm actually not using any metal. I mixed some of that dark leather brown camo, the Vallejo color that I used for his saddle, with some of that Koroks white to lighten it up because it is a very purpley tone. And it's kind of hard to tell on camera, but it adds a nice little purple color onto it. And then I'm going to make the magazine orange, and that's because I'm trying to replicate the Soviet gear and equipment. So a lot of the AK-74s later on had this plastic furniture on it that actually was a little bit of a purple color. It's called plum. And then the magazines often were the Bakelite material, which is like a compressed resin wood chip thing. It's terrible for you if you ever breathe it in. But just trying to give some similar colors to what the AK-74s would have been in real life. So purple furniture, orange magazine, and it adds a nice little color. I kind of wish I had some other magazines I'd stuck on this guy. But now we are going to go through and do the pattern on the Gold Berezka camo on all the armor panels. So you can see here I'm using Corpse Pale from the Army Painter, which is a terrible color to work with, but somehow I've used it in every single one of my videos to do up camouflage. And we're just going to be going through and just doing some, they don't have to quite, they're kind of square and digital, but luckily with how irregular they are, you don't have to worry about doing very square lines on Gold Berezka. So I'm just kind of going through and doing some irregular shapes. Whenever you're painting camouflage, I always highly recommend having your phone or an iPad or some sort of laptop on the side next to you as you're painting. And then I literally just try to duplicate the shapes as I'm painting up the pattern. So I'll, on off screen, I'm constantly looking to my left at the Gold Berezka camo I have on my computer screen and just copying the shapes that I see of this little tan color. You'll notice the tan is a little bit brighter than what the actual camo is. These brighter spots are a bit more yellow on Gold Berezka. They're a gold color, go figure. But once I go through and add a wash later on, it's going to darken them up a little bit. So just keep that in mind. If you're doing a camouflage, whatever you're doing, just go a step brighter if you're going to be doing a wash. If you're going to be doing hand shading, you can probably go a little bit more accurate, but I tend to do washes on everything just because I'm trying to save time and do an army painter thing. If I was trying to win a competition, I probably wouldn't use any washes whatsoever. I'd probably just shade and make it a lot more artsy. But you can see here, I'm just doing all these patterns on all the green armor panels. I'm trying to add some of the little shapes that hang off the edges, just to make it look like this armor was painted in a batch. And you can see here is the final result. Now, in hindsight, I do a wash of Agrax Earthshade over this camouflage. In hindsight, I probably should have thinned it down with a lot more technical medium, but I'll talk about that here in a minute. For the boots, I'm just doing a matte black and thinning it down a little bit so that way it pools in the recesses, and on some of the highlights, just that white that is on that base coat comes through a little bit, just kind of does some of the shading for me. It's a nice little quick and easy trick. If you got your really, really white base coat and then you thin down a paint, the paint won't settle on the very high points of the molds, and that white will kind of shine through a little bit because the paint is so thin, and just kind of makes it so you don't have to do any shading and highlights and stuff on your own. Makes it a little bit easier. Alrighty, so now comes the wash step. I'm using Apothecary White, Agrax Earthshade, and Gnome Oil for different parts of the model. The Apothecary White I'm using on the gas masks and the tubing on the horse and the rider. Just adds a little bit of a shade. I think this color looks really good, and it's like I'm just trying to give it a very, very subtle shadows on the gas mask, so that's all I'm going to be using this for. I usually use this shade for like clone troopers and stuff, but just adds a nice little thing. I don't really want to hand paint the shadows on the masks, so we're not going to. Alrighty, now I'm going to use Agrax Earthshade on all of the dark colored things, including the armor panels. So I'm laying this on. I'm not going super thick because this shade tends to pool and splotch, and I don't want that. I want the camouflage to shine through. Now, hindsight, I probably should have mixed it with some more technical medium because it kind of darkens the model a little bit more than I would have liked. And kind of just, I don't want it to take away from the camouflage, and I used a little bit too much of it for this particular video, and it just kind of darkens up the camouflage a little bit more than I would have liked. So hindsight, maybe mix this 50-50 with technical medium, maybe even a little bit more of technical medium, just because I'm just trying to darken those recesses and create some natural shadows. I don't want to take away from the camo, but on the leather, I go pretty heavy with the Agrax Earthshade just to kind of add some more visual interest onto all the leather bits. And while I'm doing this, I'm trying to make sure my hand is in front of the camera so it's out of focus so you can't see what I'm doing at all. It's a good little YouTube tip for you. Make sure you keep your audience guessing. You don't want them to see what they're supposed to be looking at. All right, so got that all done. Now I'm going to be using Gnome Oil on all of the guns and everything, but real quick, I'm going to take just a matte black and fill in the goggles on the horse's gas mask and also the rider's gas mask. I'm very thankful that the horse is wearing goggles because I don't want to paint horse eyes. I bet you it's no different than human eyes. It's probably exactly the same, but for my mental fatigue, I guess. I don't know what you call it, but anyways. I'm also using the matte black to go over kind of some of the edges and high points on the metal armor, because I'm going to be going back over it with lead belcher later on, just to kind of give some visual interest and show that this is a metal piece of armor, and there's a couple spots that are worn down, so that's kind of how I like to add like a quick and easy wear if I'm not trying to spend too much time on the model, is black with lead belcher over top of it. And then right here, I'm taking a little bit of that Korox white and just adding a couple of little dots onto the goggles of the horse and the rider, just to kind of give a visual trick that it is a goggle. If I was spending more time on this model, like I said, I'd probably spend a little more time on showing, giving a little more detail to make it look like a goggle, but we're trying to be quick, and I'm not trying to do any bright colors because I don't want to take away from the camo. I want all the visual interest in your eyes to be pointed at the camo. And like I said earlier, here I'm going over with lead belcher all of the little black dots that I put over the armor panels with that matte black, just to help create some contrast. And then I'm also using lead belcher on the gun and any other metal bits. I'm not trying to go crazy with this and have the guns too worn out, but I just do want them to be maybe 10% shinier, just to give a little more interest, I guess, to the metal bits to show that they are metal and they are worn a little bit. And it's a quick and easy method. And boy, this guy's getting quite dark, isn't he? Alrighty, next up, I'm taking some uniform gray, and I'm just going to be highlighting the uniform underneath. Again, hindsight, this is a very, very quick method. I'm just trying to hit some of the high points just so you can differentiate between his tunic and his pants. And then I'm also mixing up some Koroks white with that original leather color that I used, and just doing some highlights on some of the major leather areas just for some visual interest. Hindsight, I'm going to do the uniform completely different, but it looks okay enough for this video. Alrighty, here I have taken that original olive green that I did for the armor panels, and I mixed it with a little bit of white, and I'm just going to go through and edge highlight some of the armor panels, being careful not to hit the tan part of the camo, just to help show the difference between the shoulder pads, because the shoulder pads have some layers on them. I'll hit the high point of his little swoop-de-poop on the top of his helmet. I don't know what the technical term for that thing is. Maybe a World War I guy can tell me. And then I'm just using some ash gray on the logos on the front of the horse's armor and on the top of the guy's helmet. And then kind of the last thing is I'm going to be doing the base. And again, I'm just using that dark leather purple and mixing it with some leather brown and just kind of going over the whole base with that. And then I'm using the contrast Gondurafer, I guess is how you pronounce it, on some of the rocks. But, you know, I'll talk about it here in a minute, but I probably need to add a little bit more to the base.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed watching me paint this little horsey up. He's kind of weird looking. I accidentally gave the Thug Life glasses to the soldier. I'll try to get some close-up shots of that, but this really did turn out to be one of my favorite models. I'm pretty surprised. I need to do something with the base, the red rocks, and the darkness of the ground. Something, I just needed to add some, like, dead grass or some burnt wood or something. It just needs a little something. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you can support me on Patreon. It's a big, big help because right now, as this channel's starting, every dollar that goes to Patreon is literally gonna go just back into buying more models that you guys want me to paint. So if you want me to paint something specific, let me know down in the comments. I've got a whole list. I'm gonna try to do every camo. I'm gonna try to do as many as I possibly can. So let me know what you want to see down in the comments. If you don't want to support me on Patreon and you want something out of it, I do have a store, covworks.com, spelled with an E. On that website, you can get World War II historicals, some gaming accessories. We're early on in the channel at the time of this video, but eventually we're gonna have all sorts of wargaming accessories on there. So be sure to check it out. Thank you again for watching. And let me know how many times I dropped the model in this video. I don't know. I always drop the models a bunch. Thanks for watching.